An old man stood in the flames and asked God to be his witness. He had spent 7 years in a cell. He had confessed to everything they accused him of: heresy, betrayal, the spitting on the cross. He had signed it all. And now, with nothing left to lose, and the fire already lit, Jacques de Molay took it all back. This is the story of a confession used to destroy an entire order, and the man who finally refused to confirm a first lie with a second. You're watching The Fallen Kingdom, medieval history written from the documents that survived. Subscribe, and you won't miss what we uncover next. To understand why a king wanted them dead, you first have to understand how powerful they had become. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ began in 1119 as 9 knights sworn to protect pilgrims on the roads to Jerusalem. 2 centuries later, they were anything but poor. They had become the bankers of Europe, holding deposits for kings, moving money across a continent, lending at a scale no crown could match. One of their largest debtors was the King of France. Philip IV, Philip the Fair, had bled his treasury dry on war with England. He had already turned on the Lombard bankers. He had already expelled France's Jews and seized their property. He was a man who had learned that the fastest way to clear a debt was to destroy the man you owed. The Templars had something Philip needed, and an autonomy that infuriated him. They answered not to him, but to the Pope. Philip could not simply seize them. He needed a pretext that would satisfy the church. So his chancellor built one. Guillaume de Nogaret was the king's instrument, a lawyer who understood that an accusation of heresy was almost impossible to disprove. If a man was innocent, the logic ran, God would give him the strength to endure torture. If he confessed, he was guilty. There was no exit. The orders went out to every royal officer in France in September, sealed, with one instruction. They were not to be opened until the night of the 12th of October, for arrests at first light the next morning. Inside was a command of breathtaking scale. Arrest every Templar in the kingdom, on the same day, at the same hour, before any of them could run. At dawn on Friday, the 13th of October, 1307, the orders were opened. Across France, at the same moment, the king's men moved. They broke into the commanderies, seized the assets, and arrested every Templar his men could find, including the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay. Most of them were not warriors. They were middle-aged men who managed farms and accounts. They had no idea why armed men were dragging them into the dark. Then came the questions. And the questions came with fire and rope and the slow breaking of the body. The charges were a catalogue of nightmare. That they denied Christ, spat on the cross, worshipped an idol. Under torture, the confessions came. They almost always do. De Molay confessed, so did most of the men beneath him. Pope Clement V owed his throne to Philip, and he knew it. He was the one man who could have stopped this. The Templars answered to him, not the king. And instead he wavered. He tried to seize control of the proceedings, then surrendered them. He even ordered other Christian monarchs to arrest their Templars, but most of them simply did not believe the charges. And outside France, where the torture stopped, the confessions stopped with it. That should have been the saving of them. Instead, the trial dragged on for years. And then, in 1310, came a moment of courage. Roughly 600 Templars came to Paris to defend the order, to stand up and say their confessions had been beaten out of them. Two brothers, Pierre de Boulogne and Renaud de Provins, led them. Philip's answer was simple. He had the recanters declared relapsed heretics and burned. 54 of them in a single day. Pierre de Boulogne was never seen again. The message was understood. The recantations stopped. And in 1312, with the order's defenders silenced, Pope Clement dissolved the Knights Templar, not because they were proven guilty, but for the good of the Church and to end the scandal. By 1314, the order was already gone. All that remained was a final piece of theatre. On the 18th of March, de Molay and 3 other leaders were brought out to hear their sentence read in public. Life in prison. A formality, a scripted close to a settled affair. And then de Molay did the one thing no one had planned for. He recanted. Before the crowd, before the cardinals, he declared the order innocent and his own confession a lie, extracted by torture to buy an end to the pain. Geoffroy de Charnay stood with him. The 2 other leaders accepted their sentence and let their masters stand alone. Under the law, a relapsed heretic had one sentence. The king did not even wait for mourning. That evening, on a small island in the Seine, they burned him. He said his only true crime was confirming a lie against an innocent order, and that he would not confirm a first lie with a second. He asked to face the cathedral as he died. The legend says that from the fire, de Molay cursed the king and the pope to meet him before God within the year. And by an accident of history that men would never stop talking about, Pope Clement was dead within 33 days. Philip the Fair was dead before the year was out. But strip away the curse, and a colder fact remains. A bankrupt king wanted a fortune. His lawyer built a charge that could not be disproven. Torture supplied the proof. And whether Philip believed the charges or simply needed them to be true, historians still argue. A confession worth nothing, extracted from a broken man, was used to erase one of the most powerful institutions in Europe. De Molay's last act was to admit that the confession was worthless. By then, the men who trusted him had already paid for it. The Templars were never found guilty. They were found useful to destroy. And 7 centuries later, we still call Friday the 13th unlucky, without remembering whose unlucky day it was. Every century has its secrets. We dig them up. Subscribe, and you won't miss what we uncover next.